Welcome to the 23rd tutorial of my Tableau Server Client series. This series is dedicated to showcasing how to use Tableau Server Client to automate various tasks. In this video, I'll walk you through how to add and remove those items appearing in each user's favorites menu on your Tableau Server or Tableau Cloud instance using Tableau Server Client. To add or remove a favorite from a user's favorite menu for a user on your Tableau Server or Tableau Cloud instance, you will need to provide their user item, the content type, and the content item. Content items are specific workbooks, flows, data sources, views, etc. that the user wishes to appear in their favorites menu. To showcase each type of request, let us jump over to Visual Studio Code to begin developing a script that adds a favorite to a user's favorite menu and subsequently removes that same favorite. Alright, let's go ahead and get started. To begin, we'll run this initial configuration/setup block. If you're unfamiliar with this block of code, I highly recommend you checking out tutorial 2 of this series, where I walk you through signing into your Tableau Cloud or Tableau Server instance for the first time. The high-level gist of what this block does is it configures an authentication and server object, and through those two things, we'll be able to authenticate and sign in to my Tableau Cloud instance. So let's go ahead and run this. Okay, no error, we're good. Before we continue to adding favorites to a favorites menu, what I want to do is I want to showcase on the front end what this looks like. So let's go to my front end of my Tableau Cloud instance, and you'll see that I've navigated to the favorites menu for my user. And in this menu, you'll notice that there are 4 objects. So we have a flow, a data source, a workbook, and a project. And the way I added these to my favorites menu was I went to the actual content piece in the Explore menu, I found it, I could have searched for it, and I just clicked the star. And by clicking the star, it adds it to my favorites menu. And next time I want to actually access this or any of these other particular pieces of content, what I can do is just go jump to my favorites menu and find it. And this is super useful if you want to easily navigate to those pieces of content that are important to you, as opposed to exploring or navigating through the project hierarchy or searching here, or even saving URLs in your favorites. So in your bookmarks, excuse me. What I want to do here throughout this tutorial is I want to actually add these here programmatically as opposed to manually going through this, right? So what I'm going to do to begin and to have a clean slate is what we're going to do is I'm going to remove these. So I'm just going to click these. So remove them from my favorites. And now I have no favorites attached to my menu. And in the first step of this tutorial, we're going to add those back programmatically. So to do that, let's jump back over to Visual Studio Code and walk through this. The first step I need to take is if I'm going to add favorites to a menu, I need to programmatically determine, okay, which user am I adding those favorites to? Whose menu am I adding them to? The way to do that is we're going to use the user's endpoint. I'm going to say server.users.filter. I'm going to say name is equal to, and I'm going to add it to my user favorite menu. So on Tableau Cloud, the name attribute maintained for each user object or user item is going to be the email address. On Tableau Server, it could be your login information, so your login ID. It could be that unique identifier you use to log in to your Tableau Server instance. But on the cloud, it's going to be the email address. What this is going to do is we're going to use the user's endpoint to retrieve the user object associated with this name. And that's going to be unique. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this query set. So this is a query set object. And I'm going to take the first item in that query set, which is going to be a single user object. So let's go ahead and do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to showcase the attributes that are maintained for this user and every other user. So this is the object, this user object that we retrieved from my cloud instance. We have the ID, so the local unique identifier that uniquely identifies this user item or object. The last login information. So this stuff you can see on the front end as well. But the important attribute here is going to be this favorites attribute. This favorites attribute, you'll notice its value is none. And why is that? So by default, every time you retrieve a user object or even a series of users, the favorites attribute is going to be unpopulated or none. And the reason being is because in order to populate this favorites attribute, which is going to be the user's favorites menu content, we have to use the populate favorites method at the user's endpoint. So what I can do here is I'm going to say server.favorites.populate users, and this should be server.users.populate favorites, and then I pass in the user. So this is going to populate the user's favorites for this particular user. and I'm passing that in. So let's go ahead and do that. And let's print this again now. So if I print this again, what we're going to see now when we get to the user favorites attribute, we have this dictionary structure, and the keys are going to be the content types. So we have data sources, flows, projects, metrics, views, workbooks. And what I can do now is, so you see these are empty, right? The lists or the values are empty. There's no favorites, right? Because we just saw that I cleared my favorites menu. What I want to do is I want to populate those. I want to add those back. And I'm going to do this in what's probably going to come off as a strange way, but hopefully it makes sense in the end. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a dictionary structure that kind of matches this and add in those 4 favorites back. So I'll say new favorites. I have no idea why this is highlighting. It's probably because of that. New favorites is equal to. And I'm going to create a dictionary that's the keys are going to be the content types, just like this. And the values are going to be those favorites that we just previously deleted from my favorites menu. So let's do data sources. Let's just do data source. And I will explain here in a moment why this is singular as opposed to plural. And to get the data source, so the key again is going to be the content type, and the actual value is going to be the favorites or the content item we are trying to add to my favorites menu. So I'm going to say server.datasources.filter name is equal to North America sales. And I'm going to take the first item in that query set. So just like this user query up here, we're going to be using a different endpoint. So in this case, a data sources endpoint, and we're going to filter or retrieve that data source that has a name of North America sales. All right. And the next thing we'll do is we're going to go ahead, let's go ahead and get the project. So I'm going to say project. So I'm going to get the North America sales project. And you guessed it, we're going to use the project endpoint. And we're going to filter the same way. Same thing with flow and for the workbook. So I'll go workbook, server.workbooks.filter, name is equal to North America sales. And this is going to retrieve that workbook item or object called North America sales. For the flow, you may have caught it, but the flow, I actually named it a little bit differently than the workbook project and data source. So I said, let's do flows.filter. Name is equal to North America sales. And I said, or I named it bridge enabled because it is using a bridge connection. Close that off. And we're going to have this dictionary structure again, that the keys are the content types that we want to add to our favorites menu. And the actual value for each of those keys is going to be the particular piece of content that we're adding to the menu. So let's just go ahead and take a look at this. I'm going to print this out, and we're going to see what this dictionary structure now contains as values. What we should be seeing is we should see the actual object retrieved from each of these queries. Okay, so we have a data source, and then as the value, as expected, we have the actual data source object that we retrieved from the server. The same thing applies to flows, projects, and workbook. So we have a project key, and the value is the particular project that we retrieved using this query. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to add these back to my favorites menu. So let's go ahead and do that. And to do that, we're going to use this dictionary structure. Obviously, we didn't create it just to create it. So I'm going to say for favorite type, favorite item. So for each key and value, in new favorites.items, we're going to add these individually. So I'm going to say server.favorites, say add favorites. So I'm using the favorites endpoint in the add favorite method. Let's just add these one by one. So the arguments are going to be user item, or the parameters. I'm going to set that to user. The content type is going to be the key in the dictionary. So the content type is going to be equal to favorite type. And the favorite item. So this item is equal to favorite item. Okay, So for each of these keys, so for each key and value, we're going to iterate through. So we're going to go through this, and we're going to add a favorite corresponding to that key, so the favorite type, and the particular piece of content we're adding, the favorite item. Let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to run this. And before I run it, let's actually print this off. So let's print this off. The reason I want to print this, let's print it once before. So before we add them, so we should see a blank dictionary structure here. So we should have keys but no values. And as soon as we add them, we should see the newly added favorites. So we're going to say print user.favorites. And I might actually have to repopulate these, but we'll see. Let me just go ahead and do that again. Okay, let's go ahead and run this. Yeah, so user item must be populated with favorites first. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this off, and we'll just do this manually. So I'm going to run this back here. So we're adding those favorites, and you'll notice here I'm printing the favorites down here after we've added them. So you'll now see that this dictionary structure is populated. So we're back to the original dictionary structure where the content type is plural, right? This is not my dictionary structure, new favorites. This is the one that's maintained on the server for each user favorites. And you'll notice that this is the value is now a list, right? That's because a user can favorite more than one data source, right? So this list is technically a length of 1 because we've only added one favorite. So if we go to data sources, we have projects. So there's a list of one project, the corresponding item. Same thing with flows. We have one flow added to the favorites. What I want to do to visually see this, right, as opposed to this terminal here, let's jump back over to my Tableau Cloud instance and see what took place. So here is the state we left this page at. So before we started this adding items to my favorites menu, I deleted them all, right? So you'll notice here, these are still showing up, these messages, we deleted them all. Now, if I refresh this, we should see those 4 favorites added back. So the North America Sales Workbook, Data Source, and Project, and also the North America Sales Bridge Enabled Flow. So let's go ahead and refresh this. And there they are. So we've programmatically added favorites to a favorites menu. Now, what's really nice about this, being able to do this programmatically, is there is no alternative to doing this for another user on the front end. It doesn't matter if you're a site admin, a server admin, you cannot add a favorite for somebody unless you do it programmatically. And the great thing about that is being able to do it programmatically, what we can do, if you think about user onboarding, say I have, John works in North America Sales and Susie is joining the team too. Well, as soon as Susie joins the server, you could run a script and say, hey, mirror John's favorites. And I'm actually going to release a video about this in the future on how to mirror user favorites. But I just want you to know how powerful this is because you literally cannot do this manually in the front end. The only favorites you can add as any type of user is to your own favorites menu. You cannot add a favorite to somebody else's menu. All right, now that we've added favorites to my favorites menu, what I want to do next is let's remove them. So because we have already written the code to add these particular 4 favorites to this menu, a lot of the work has already been done for us. And what I'm going to be able to do is I'm able to copy and paste much of the code with slight alterations to it to be able to remove these same 4 favorites from my favorites menu. So to begin, let's go ahead and jump back over to Visual Studio Code. And let's start removing those. All right, so I'm going to scroll down to this remove items from user favorites menu block and do much of the same thing. So again, we can copy and paste a lot of this. So if I want to remove a user favorites, I need to identify which user to remove this from. I'm going to go ahead and retrieve that user item or object using the user's endpoint, and the filtering mechanism for which I filter on name is equal to this email address. That's going to return that user item or object. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy and paste this whole lot here and put it back in this block. We're going to make some slight changes. So here, I'm going to call these deletions because we're not going to add favorites, we're going to delete them. And our deletions are going to be defined in this dictionary where, again, the keys are the content types of the content that we're trying to delete. and the values are the particular content items. So in this case, for a data source, what is the particular data source I'm trying to remove? Well, I'm trying to remove a data source called North America Sales that's in my favorites menu. And one caveat to this, and which is kind of annoying, so whenever I was first exploring this Tableau Server Client library, I noticed something particular about the add favorite method and the method called delete favorite method, which we'll be using here in a moment. I noticed that it's almost as if two different people authored these methods. And the reason I say that is because if we were to run this, deletions, and I was to actually change this to deletions, what we're going to do is we're going to get a resource not found error. And the reason being is because the content types, the content type values, the key values accepted for the delete favorite method, they are slightly different than those that are allowed for the add favorite method. And it's pretty bizarre. But if I was to run this, we would get we get the resource not found error, which is not exactly straightforward and doesn't really tell you. It's not very intuitive. That's what the issue is that these key values are not correct. We need to change these from the singular to the plural. So data sources, projects, workbooks, flows. And the interesting thing about this is this actually matches the exact structure that you would see in a user item. So if when we retrieved this user and we populated the user's favorites, the keys were actually plural. But when you add a favorite, the key is singular. And when you delete a favorite or remove a favorite, it's going to be plural. So again, when you're adding a favorite, make sure your keys, so if you're deleting a data source, the key needs to be singular. When you're deleting a favorite or removing a favorite, they need to be plural. Okay, so we've got that. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to go through, remove these 4 things. We're going to do that by using this loop that goes through the keys and values in my dictionary. We're going to call the delete favorite method, and we're going to delete this favorite method accepts the user item. So who are we deleting and removing the favorites for? What type of favorite is it? Is it a data source, project, workbook, flow, etc.? And what is the specific piece of content we're removing? So let's go ahead and remove that, or run this. Okay, and you'll see that when I printed out user favorites at the end here, after deleting them, we get the expected result, right? We get a structure, a favorite structure that's maintained for this user and every other user. But this one is empty, right? So the values or the specific pieces of content that are associated with each content type, there aren't any because we removed them, right? I only had 4 and I removed all 4 of them. Now, let's jump over to my Tableau Cloud instance on the front end and see this. We're going to see the same thing. So we're going to see a favorites menu that is now void of content. Okay, so this is the state we left it in. If I hit refresh, we're going to see that these are no longer there. All right, and we successfully removed those 4 favorites from my favorites menu. So to recap what we've done so far and in this tutorial, let's go to the top. We authenticated with my server by creating a authentication object and a server object, and using those 2 things, we signed in. So we're signing in here using the authentication object. We specified the user for which we want to add or remove items from the favorites menu. We did that using the user's endpoint and filtering on that particular user. We then created a dictionary that contains the content for which we want to remove. And we did that using keys as the content type and the value being the specific piece of content associated with that content type that we're trying to add or remove. We then iterated through those items in that dictionary and either use the add favorite method or the delete favorite method to do the corresponding action. All right, that wraps up this video on modifying user favorite menus programmatically through Tableau Server Client. I hope you found this tutorial useful and can use the concepts I've covered to level up your ability to manage your own Tableau Server or Tableau Cloud instance through automation. If you enjoyed this video, then please like the video and subscribe to my channel for notifications on future videos. Thank you again, and see you next time.